In the boundless starry sky, countless worlds await exploration, one leaf, one bodhi, one flower, one world, fantasy immortal hero, carefree life, heart-wrenching, love-hate, and hatred. Chapter 1. Rebirth, Revised. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Li Feng, a modern and handsome college student, enjoys martial arts novels and is particularly obsessed with ancient martial arts. By chance, I met Xiao'e, a descendant of ancient martial arts, and became Xiao'e's little puppy in order to learn ancient martial arts. After practicing martial arts that day, I accompanied Xiao'e to watch the era drama Love in a Courtyard. Because there were too many emotions in the drama, Xiao'e got angry and kicked me. It was also Li Feng's misfortune that he was kicked to the ground. When he fell to the ground, he hit a diamond-shaped stone in the back of his head and lost too much blood on the way to the hospital, resulting in his death. After death, the soul enters a pitch-black space where nothing can be seen. I don't know how long it has been, but suddenly a colorful gap appeared in the space. The gap became wider and wider, and I could vaguely see many colorful balls inside the gap. Each colored ball displays a different screen. Some of the scenes depict ancient knights, some are cultivators stepping on flying swords, some are cultivators undergoing countless changes, and there are also divine beasts such as unicorns, dragons, phoenixes. All kinds of things. In the winter of 1958, Li Feng rubbed his swollen and painful head and stared blankly around. The gray courtyard, the crooked trees, and the desolate cold wind. There are still many people talking, carefully looking at everyone, wearing old clothes from the 1960s, with a yellow and thin face but looking full of energy. Li Feng is anxious and uneasy, this is a fear of the unknown. I thought to myself, I should be dreaming, I should wake up soon. Li Haotian has a meeting. A loud voice startled me awake. Li Feng thought to himself, who is this calling? It shouldn't be himself, my name is Li Feng. Hearing someone speaking, Li Feng was still very happy in his heart. This was the most beautiful voice he had ever heard, and he silently prayed to know the owner of the voice. Hurriedly searching for the voice to look over, only to see a big oily face in front of me, and I shrank in fear. Immediately after, he froze and a large memory came to his mind. There is a couple and children, some children wet the bed, some neighbor girl, and some damn little devils. After digesting the memories, I learned what the current situation was. This is all the memories of a person named Li Haotian before the age of 20, little by little clear. It's not just a dream, is it a journey? But with the addition of Li Haotian's memory, that is rebirth. Looking back on the original world, even orphans who grew up in orphanages didn't have much to give up. Just thinking of Xiao'e, a bit indignant. Before getting to know Xiao'e, I completed 9 years of compulsory education by picking up garbage, sneaking around, and deceiving others. Later on, I was admitted to college and worked hard and studied hard for a summer vacation to make up for the tuition fees. Later on, we talked about a girlfriend, and Xiao'e got to know each other through her. Don't think too much, let's settle for what we have. We should live a more exciting life now than in the previous one. Suddenly, in my mind came, ding. Congratulations to the host for successfully integrating into this world. Ding. Now start binding the system. 1%, 2%. 10%, 20%, 30% / 50%. 80%. 99% ding. Congratulations on successfully binding the host. Ding. Congratulations to the host for opening the system for the first time. A big gift package is now available. Ding. Do you want to open the big gift package? Ding. Please choose between yes or no for the host. No, murmured silently in his heart when I came to my senses and thought about having a system, I could reach the pinnacle of life, and my face couldn't help but feel excited. The diamond-shaped transparent crystal turned out to be the system, but it died due to excessive blood loss. Consciousness returns and flips through memories in the mind, gaining a certain understanding of one's new identity. Name: Li Haotian, currently 20 years old, unmarried. According to the leader above, both parents died on the battlefield. I have never seen them before, but I feel it's not that simple. In this era, having a formidable identity as a martyr's orphan is still very advantageous, and the country has many preferential policies. Inheriting the relationship between my previous parents, I grew up in the courtyard with several uncles from a young age. Several uncles firmly refused to go to the battlefield, fearing that my family would be extinct. Therefore, they forcibly arranged to work in the security department of the Red Star steel rolling plant, holding the position of deputy department head. The factory has also allocated a house, located at number 95 Courtyard in Nanluoga Lane. Nanluoga Lane, full of love in Xiao'e. It is now the winter of 1958, and Jia Dongshu has not hung the wall yet, and Lu Xiao'e has not entered the courtyard. But when Su Damao said he was getting married soon, he thought he would wait for his job to stabilize and have his beard cut off. At the current staff meeting, an old man named Yi Zhonghai said, "Let's gather everyone and talk about something." Just now, the pillar pushed down Jia Zhang, and Jia Zhang fell heavily at such an old age. The three of us are in charge of compensating the pillar with 5 yuan for medical expenses, and then apologizing and apologizing. This matter is over. We are a civilized quadrangle courtyard. We need to be harshly criticized for hitting the elderly with pillars, and we also need to punish them for cleaning the courtyard for a month. Otherwise, if rumors spread, our quadrangle courtyard's reputation will be ruined. The second and third grandfathers brought the two of them with angry eyes and twisted faces as they listened to the first grandmaster speak, which was very pleasing. The old man didn't even discuss with them, so he made his own decision, which made their faces contorted in anger. But for the dignity of the three masters, they didn't say anything. Silly Zhu never hit the Jia and Zhang clans, so naturally he doesn't recognize them. Otherwise, if the reputation of hitting an old man spreads, who would dare to introduce him to someone else? He's not really stupid, his intelligence only declines when he meets Qin Huairu. Although he tried his best to defend himself, his face turned red with anger, but no one in the yard spoke to him. Silly Zhu often offends people with his foul mouth, and his neighbors are not foolish enough to wish him bad luck. It's ridiculous that he doesn't know yet. Every time Silly Zhu says nothing, he hits and kicks people in the crotch. Yi Zhonghai, an old man, intentionally favors him. Silly Zhu is basically okay after hitting people, which makes him have a cognitive error and become more reckless. Su Damao in the backyard was beaten the hardest by him, he had to beat him up almost once a week. Su Damao himself is also cheap-mouthed, and whenever he has something to do, he goes to stimulate silly pillars. Silly Zhu is really impatient now. He dare not hit Jia and Zhang, afraid of being falsely accused again. Another reason may be that his Qin sister is looking at him with tears in her eyes. Silly Zhu suddenly saw Li Haotian in the crowd and called out, "Deputy Chief Li, I really didn't hit Aunt Jia. You are from the security department, I believe you, please help me." In order to quickly go back and study the functions of the system, I decided to meddle in this matter and stood up to say to Yi Zhonghai, "What a great official authority. Do you want to have a speech hall? Why only listen to Aunt Jia? I gave it to everyone in the hospital at a general meeting and didn't give them a chance to speak." Yi Zhonghai, an old man, was startled. With such a big hat on his head, he quickly stood up and said, "Li Haotian, don't talk nonsense, there's nothing wrong. Everyone is equal in the whole assembly, and everyone can speak. It's up to you not to say it yourself." Li Haotian said, "So that's how you judged the case. You just listened to what Jia Zhang said in your mouth. The judges don't even give such judgments. Are you trying to solve the problem or are you intentionally biased?" Yi Zhonghai sat down angrily and said, "Then let the pillar speak." Silly Zhu stood up and looked gratefully at Li Haotian, saying, "Just now when I came back from work, I was preparing to give Qin Jia a lunchbox and was talking to her. Aunt Jia rushed over and slapped Qin Jie. I was in a hurry and pulled her, and she fell on her own. Jia Zhang cursed at silly Zhu, saying, Silly Zhu, you heartless despicable bastard. Can you fall if you don't pull me? Oh my. Lao Jia. Come up and take a look. Silly Zhu is bullying our orphan and widowed mother. My son is supporting me and may have broken his leg. Silly Zhu, you dog must compensate, otherwise we will have to go to your house to make trouble. Silly Zhu anxiously said, I. He couldn't speak. He is still very afraid of the Jia Zhang family. Li Haotian saw someone summoning souls and immediately shouted loudly, Great. You dare to engage in feudal superstition. I think this needs to be reported to the street office. Ga. Jia Zhang immediately shut up upon hearing this. Turn around and look at an old man named Yi Zhonghai. Yi Zhonghai didn't know what to do. If this matter were to be handled by the street office, it would show that our grandfather was incompetent. He quickly stood up and said, What's wrong, Comrade Li Haotian? You, Mr. Jia and Mr. Zhang, are too old to understand. Look at the affairs in this courtyard, let's solve them in the courtyard. We have an old tradition. This requires the street office to know that this year's advanced courtyard will be gone, and the year-end rewards for the neighbors in the courtyard will also be gone. You don't want to go against all the neighbors in the courtyard, do you? Li Haotian looked at Yi Zhonghai with a smile and said, What are you doing? Moral kidnapping. If you can't solve it yourself, you won't let anyone tell you. If Jia Zhang makes a mistake, you won't stop her, but you still have to help her hide and cover up. Grandpa, you have a problem with your thinking. Chapter 2. War Moral Heavenly Sovereign. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Yi Zhonghai said with a gloomy expression, I'm also doing it for everyone's good. If you don't want it, then what do you say? Li Haotian said, Everyone in the big winter may have frozen out, but in fact, things can be solved easily. Why make it so complicated? Everyone in the courtyard. Li Haotian ignored the others and continued, Aunt Jia, silly Zhu pushed you to the hospital as soon as possible. What are you talking about here? It's not as much as you want to get a certificate from the hospital. The hospital can check if you're injured, and the money you pay for going to the hospital will be given to you by silly Zhu. But if there's nothing wrong with you, falsely accusing a good person, then you have to admit the punishment, right? Li Haotian complained that Yi Zhonghai had kept him frozen for so long, thinking of revenge, and said, How about an old man help take you to the hospital? I believe that this respected and caring old man in our yard will not refuse. Isn't it, Grandpa? Yi Zhonghai's face changed and he was thinking of a solution. The neighbors in the courtyard were discussing one after another, and various voices were making a lot of noise. Ouch! Ouch! Jia Zhang pretended to be calling out. Li Haotian hurriedly said, Grandpa, do you want to watch Aunt Jia die of pain? It's you who usually asks us to care for our neighbors and respect the elderly and children. You're not just talking, are you? Li Haotian continued to put pressure on Yi Zhonghai and said, or rather, you know that Aunt Jia is pretending and joining forces to deceive everyone. With a constipated expression on his face, Yi Zhonghai looked at Li Haotian and said, Don't talk nonsense. How would I know? I'll send someone to the hospital. Jia Zhangshi saw good things in the soup and cursed in the direction of Li Haotian. How could I provoke you, you despicable and despicable household? You wrongly accused me of not living anymore. Be careful, I'll hit you dead in front of your door and splatter you with blood. Li Haotian looked at Jia Zhang and said, Aunt Jia, why did I wrongly ask you to go to the hospital for medical treatment with my good intentions? And you feel like you're going to run into a wall when you've had enough life. No one can stop you, and it's none of my business. After finishing speaking to Jia Zhang, Li Haotian turned his head to look at Yi Zhonghai and said, Grandpa, why don't you hurry and take Aunt Jia to the hospital? The longer you delay, the more serious it becomes. After Li Haotian finished speaking, he whispered to himself on the side, I don't know what you're thinking. If someone falls and doesn't take them to the hospital first, they have a meeting to discuss compensation. They must have a mental problem and are all crazy. Everyone around Li Haotian heard what he said, blushing with embarrassment as he lowered his head and dared not lift it up. It was too embarrassing. Yi Zhonghai pretended not to hear and shamelessly said, a few people will help Jia Dongxiu take her mother to the hospital. No one moved, everyone could see clearly that the Jia family, who belonged to the Pishio tribe, couldn't even shake it off. No one wants to be a scapegoat. Besides, Jia Zhang usually scolds this and that without any reason, and everyone has been offended. Yi Zhonghai looked at his neighbor in the courtyard and wanted someone to take the initiative to help. Those he saw avoided his gaze, and no one was willing to step forward. Yi Zhonghai was extremely angry in his heart, and he had to put on a positive expression on his face, but it seemed like his face was slightly deformed. Seeing no one moving, Yi Zhonghai began to call out, Guangtian, Guangfu, why is your father also the second eldest in the courtyard? Help take care of the neighbors and set an example for everyone. Ah! With a sound of Guangtian and Guangfu, they all looked at the second master together. Second Grandpa Lu Haizhong couldn't have missed such a good performance opportunity and hurriedly said, what are you looking at? As an old master in the courtyard, my neighbors should help if they are in trouble. Go quickly. These two grandfathers, Lu Haizhong, favored their eldest son Lu Guangqi and often beat and scolded their two younger sons. When Lu Haizhong saw them, their bodies instinctively trembled and their faces turned pale with fear. It can be imagined how hard Lu Haizhong hit his son. Guangtian Guangfu heard Lu Haizhong say it a second time and quickly ran over to help, otherwise he would get beaten again tonight. Jia Zhang knew she was fine and naturally refused to go to the hospital. Jia Dongxiu could only speak comforting words slowly beside him. He was really worried about his mother's affairs, and the relationship between mother and son was very deep. At this time, Jia Dongxiu looks pretty good, otherwise he wouldn't be considered one of Yi Zhonghai's elderly people. The neighbors in the courtyard looked at each other, unable to conceal their smiles, all watching the Jia family's jokes. Enough! Yi Zhonghai roared angrily. Today, Yi Zhonghai's face is quite embarrassing. We cannot let Jia Zhang continue to make such a fuss, otherwise the people in the courtyard will only think that Yi Zhonghai bullies the weak and fears the hard, or is biased. Yi Zhonghai always feels like his neighbors in the courtyard are mocking him now. Didn't he see everyone watching the play? This Jia Zhang family is just a mouse droppings, smelly and hard, with a diaphragm that can withstand people. What kind of person is Jia Zhang? He bullies others with reason, rolls around recklessly without reason, and attracts souls. How could he listen to Yi Zhonghai? This is not coming again, so he cursed at Yi Zhonghai and said, Yi Zhonghai, you bastard, old and immortal, dead and desperate. Didn't you see that I was bullied? Lao Jia and you are like brothers. You just take care of our orphaned and widowed mother like this, oh. Lao Jia. Come up and take a look, Yi Zhonghai, this desperate household is helping outsiders bully us. Enough. Jia Zhangshi. Yi Zhonghai trembled with anger. Turning to Jia Dongxiu, he said, Dongxiu, quickly help your mother back. Yi Zhonghai finished speaking to the crowd and said, the others have dispersed. We will discuss this matter later. After Yi Zhonghai finished speaking, he hurriedly ran away. It's embarrassing not to leave. When everyone in the courtyard saw that there was no play to watch, the old man left and got up, grabbed chairs, and went home one after another. They didn't want to meddle in the Jia family's affairs. The crowd walked in groups of 3 or 5, chatting and occasionally laughing. Today, this scene made everyone laugh for a long time. Second Uncle Lu Haizhong was about to leave when he saw everyone, so he quickly stood up and put on an official airs, saying, today's conference of the whole courtyard was a complete success. Don't talk nonsense after it's over, so as not to embarrass the courtyard. Alright, let's end the meeting. The third master quickly said, your second master is right. Don't gossip after you go back. You don't want to be pointed at by others, do you? Several gentlemen have all left, and I am also preparing to leave. At this moment, silly Zhu stopped and said, thank you, Deputy Director Li, today. Otherwise, I will lose money again. I will treat you to a meal another day to try my craft. Li Haotian waved his hand and said, it's okay, I just can't stand them bullying honest people. So why did I leave in advance? Chapter 3. System. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Li Haotian returned home and carefully examined his lifelong home. The left room of the 3 rooms was a bedroom and study, the middle dining room with a living room, and the kitchen on the right was a miscellaneous room. First, I went to the kitchen and lit the stove with water. As soon as I came back from work and hadn't even entered the house, I called out for a meeting. After delaying for so long, my stomach was already hungry. Fortunately, everything in the kitchen can be eaten for a while. In my previous life, I was an orphan and had worked as a chef. Of course, I had also done everything and my skills were quite good, at least not inferior to silly pillars. I took a deep breath at the front door, baked the house, and my body warmed up. I made some food 3 times, 5 times, and 2 times. After finishing the meal, I leaned back on the chair and shouted in my heart, system. Ding! I'm at the host. Li Haotian asked in his heart, what functions do you have? Ding! The host system can allow you to cross the heavens and all worlds. There is also a check that IN system that allows you to sign in every day, month, and year. Ding! The things you get from checking in every day will vary according to different worlds, and most of them are daily necessities. Ding! The monthly sign can obtain anything in the parallel world of martial arts. You can obtain anything from the fantasy world with an annual visa. Li Haotian asked in his heart, can I go back now? Ding! No, your original world body has already been cremated, crossing back has too much cause and effect, which is detrimental to yourself. Li Haotian thought to himself, system. Where is my beginner gift package? System. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining a beginner gift pack. Li Haotian said inwardly, system. Open the beginner gift pack. System. Ding. Congratulations to the host for opening the novice gift package, and the host has obtained the 9-yang manual, complete, and 100-year internal power. Li Haotian thought to himself, system. Can I still sign in today? Ding. Sure. Li Haotian thought to himself, system check that IN. Ding. Congratulations. The host has successfully signed in. Ding. First sign-in is equivalent to 1 annual sign-in. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining 1 in the small world. Li Haotian exclaimed excitedly, little world. Li Haotian stood up and covered his heart with his hand, saying, system, can I myself and others enter the small world? Sure. Li Haotian quickly arrived at the door, inserted the door inside, and then returned to bed to lie down. The heart-calling system enters the small world, and then the whole person disappears into the room. Li Haotian enters the small world and feels everything here. The small world is 1/3 the size of Earth, and the maximum ratio of time inside to outside can be 1.100 days. Being in this world is like being able to transcend everything within. This can still grow with crossing the heavens and all realms. Li Haotianping regained his mood and shouted. System, give me the 9-yang manual and 100-year internal power. Li Haotian quickly sat down cross-legged and carefully comprehended the 9-yang manual. After practicing the 9-yang manual, the tendons would easily wash the marrow and give birth to the dense purple gas. The internal power was born at a very fast speed. Ordinary fists and feet could also use great attack power. The defense power was unmatched. They automatically protected the body and rebounded the external force to attack, making Vajra an indestructible body. The speed of the learner would be greatly increased. It is also a healing scripture, where all diseases do not arise and all poisons do not invade. The full use of the heat energy can burn people into coke, specifically breaking through all cold and toxic internal forces. The 9 Yang Manual is a comprehensive martial arts system. After being trained, all martial arts in the world will be available. This skill also includes bone shrinking skill, turtle breathing skill, wall walking skill and other skills. With the blessing of the 9 Yang Manual and 100 years internal power, Li Haotian's realm has never entered the realm of land immortals. The realm of martial arts is not to enter, to be acquired, to be innate, to be a master, to be a great master, to be a celestial being, to be a land immortal, and to break the void. Li Haotian asked the system in his heart, what realm is the land immortal equivalent to in the cultivation world? Ding. Host, don't aim too high. You are now equivalent to the weakest period of qi refining in the cultivation world. Li Haotian thought to himself, I can say now that I am invincible in this world. Generally, pistols and rifles cannot be hit, and I am not afraid of being hit. The 9 Yang Manual protects my body. Maybe my internal power will be consumed quickly by that time. Those who can hurt me with big firepower cannot be hit, because I also have the mental power to open sea awareness. I can control within 1,000 meters. Li Haotian learned everything in the small world and just discovered that there is also a spiritual spring inside. The function of the spiritual spring is also amazing, and drinking it regularly can prolong life and enhance beauty. In the small world, there are mountains, forests, grasslands, black soil, freshwater lakes, and the sea. Li Haotianxin thought of a mansion that had risen from the ground in a small world where he had not yet lived. Inside the mansion, there was an ancient and fragrant atmosphere, with magnolia bonsai and lush green leaves, and the room was filled with fragrance. The gorgeous curtains and exquisite furniture complemented each other, making the entire mansion even more magnificent and magnificent. Li Haotian flashed into the main hall of the mansion and sat down, thinking to himself, go to the grain station tomorrow to buy some seeds and use the land of the small world. In this era of food and clothing shortage, you don't have to worry about hunger, and you can also provide relief for young girls and those young women. After planning, Li Haotian left the small world and lay in bed thinking about a better life in the future. The corners of his mouth couldn't help but rise, and he fell asleep in a daze. Li Haotian woke up just as the sky was bright, feeling the powerful power in his body. There was no confusion or fear, only a longing for the future. Wake up happily, poke open the coal stove, boil water, and use it for washing and cooking later. It didn't take long for the water to boil. I grabbed some rice, made a sweet potato, boiled congee, and went to wash. Arriving at the backyard pool, I happened to see Su Damao washing up and returning to his house next door. Su Damao, this petty person, has just taken over his father's class for less than a year and works as a projectionist at the Red Star steel rolling plant. Li Haotian was stunned and Su Damao took the initiative to approach and greet him, Deputy Chiefly, good morning. Li Haotian pretended not to know each other and smiled back, good morning. Who are you? Su Damao quickly introduced, hello, leader, I am a projectionist from Su Damao's Red Star rolling mill. Li Haotian nodded politely and pretended to be enthusiastic, saying, hello, brother Mao. You're older than me and don't have to call me Li Feng so politely. No, call me Li Haotian. Li Haotian turned his head, feeling guilty, and secretly observed Su Damao's expression. I thought to myself, I'm glad I changed it just now, otherwise I wouldn't know what's going on. I need to be more careful in the future. Seeing that Su Damao didn't pay attention to what he said earlier, Li Haotian quietly breathed a sigh of relief. Su Damao didn't notice anything and showed a flattering expression, saying, did Deputy Chiefly eat it? I still have a few eggs to give to the leader for you to replenish your body later. Li Haotian didn't want to say much, but he was afraid of revealing the truth. He said, "Don't mention it, brother Dumao. I cooked congee there, and I don't want to waste it. The country encourages thrift." Li Haotian paused for a moment and saw that Su Dumao was not speaking, so he continued, "Big brother, do you have anything else to do? If it's okay, I need to go wash up." Su Dumao regained his senses and quickly said, "It's okay, Deputy Director Li, you're busy." Li Haotian nodded and turned around to wash up. Li Haotian turned around and walked forward. After a few steps, his mental strength saw Su Dumao give me a scolding and quickly slipped back when he saw that I wasn't paying attention. Li Haotian thought to himself, Su Dumao is really not a good person. If there is a chance, we must give him a good scolding. Li Haotian finished washing up and went home to finish his meal. He put on his uniform, coat, and leather shoes and went to work. Chapter 4. Moral Kidnapping. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. After locking the door, Li Haotian saw that the second master of the courtyard, Lu Haizhong, was also preparing to work. He symbolically greeted him, "Second master, good morning." Perhaps Deputy Director Li took the initiative to greet Lu Haizhong, making him feel superior. He looked up at Li Haotian with his hands on his back and his chest straight, then nodded and said, Li Haotian, are you planning to go to work? Let's go together. I'll take you to the factory with me, second grandpa. It will save a lot of trouble. After all, I'm also a senior forging worker, and I still have a lot of face in the factory. I'm still the second grandpa in the courtyard, so I should take care of you young people. Don't you be reckless and bump into the leadership. Li Haotian was a bit angry, but he took a deep breath when he thought about leaving a good impression on his leader on his first day at work today. Feeling angry in his heart, he replied calmly, "Thank you, second grandpa. However, I still have a lot of things to do today. If it's not going my way, can we reschedule?" Upon hearing my refusal, Grandpa Lu Haizhong immediately showed a displeased expression on his face. Li Haotian saw it and thought to himself, does Lu Haizhong think that the 7th level forging worker and the second master in the courtyard are very impressive? Then it's someone as impressive as him who invites me humbly. We shouldn't refuse him, as it would make him lose face. Second Uncle Lu Haizhong snorted coldly at Li Haotian's displeasure, then turned around and left on his own. Li Hao's mood is unstable due to the weather, almost unable to control the pressure of releasing the land immortal realm. Li Haotian finally suppressed his emotions and showed a bitter smile. I have already thought of countless ways to deal with Lu Haizhong in my heart. I really have no temper as the deputy department head. Continuing forward, we arrived at the courtyard and saw the main room, with the door of the silly pillar's house tightly closed. I thought to myself that Chef He's working hours are the same as TV dramas, he can't get up before time. Suddenly, a malicious gaze turned towards Li Haotian, and upon sensing something, he immediately turned his head to search. However, he only saw Yi Zhonghai standing there, unable to feel that something was wrong. Li Haotian believed in his own feelings and felt that the malicious gaze just now was from Yi Zhonghai. This is confidence in one's own strength. Without evidence, Li Haotian couldn't easily trigger a seizure. Since he saw it, he politely greeted him, "Good morning, Grandpa." Yi Zhonghai suddenly shouted, "Li Haotian." Li Haotian heard Yi Zhonghai call him, so he had to turn around and stop to look at Yi Zhonghai, asking, "What's the matter with Uncle calling me?" Seeing Li Haotian stop, Yi Zhonghai took a few steps forward and said, "Li Haotian, haven't you gone yet? Greet the deaf old lady." Li Haotian Yi Zhonghai saw that Li Haotian didn't speak and continued, "The deaf old lady is a 5-guarantee household and also the oldest elderly person in our yard. Her husband and son sacrificed themselves on the battlefield, and she herself also gave grass shoes to the Red Army. She is a martyr's family. Even Yang, the head of the steel mill, came to visit her. The street office also asked us to take good care of her." Yi Zhonghai paused for a moment and looked at me before I could express his opinion. He continued to morally kidnap me and said, our courtyard is a civilized quadrangle. We should emphasize civilization, respect the elderly, love the young, and unite and help each other. People with bad morals cannot stay in a quadrangle. Yesterday, I also did that because the Jia family was pitiful. The Jia family only had enough food for Jia Dongxiu, and there was not enough food for a family of 4 to eat. It's so difficult. And you also know how difficult life is now. I often help households in need, but your mother is not in good health, often taking medicine, and her abilities are limited. It's just a drop in the bucket. You are a national cadre and should take the lead in donating money and goods to those in need. Otherwise, this will undermine unity and spread the reputation of disrespect for the elderly and love for the young. Li Hao's weather was scorching hot, exuding the aura of a land god. Fortunately, Li Haotian had reason and only targeted Yi Zhonghai. Otherwise, no matter how the courtyard would feel like the end of the day was approaching. Li Haotian caught a glimpse of Yi Zhonghai's forehead sweating, his footsteps stumbling, and he quietly withdrew some pressure, so that Yi Zhonghai did not fall. Li Haotian was too scared to speak when he saw Yi Zhonghai. He looked at him and asked, is it your idea or hers for me to go and greet the deaf old lady? Li Haotian suddenly raised his voice and said loudly, I have heard of the deaf old lady. How did she apply for the 5 guarantees? Let's not talk about it for now. The government supports the elderly who are alone and widowed. That's right, and I firmly support national policies. But Yi Zhonghai said that her husband and son died on the battlefield, and she even sent grass shoes to the Red Army and supported the army. Then asked the deaf old lady, what battles did her husband and son participate in, and in which battles did they sacrifice themselves? She can't possibly not even know about these, can she? Let me ask you again, what kind of army does an old lady with small feet support? Did she send grass shoes by plane? Speaking of you, you often talk about helping households in need. Who else have you helped besides the Jia family? Say. The words spoken by Li Hao were full of momentum, as he roared out with true energy from the heavens. Li Haotian's voice was loud, just to gather everyone. After a while, most of the people in the front, middle, and backyards arrived. When they heard Li Haotian's words, they all talked and pointed at Yi Zhonghai. Of course, the neighbors also heard Li Haotian expose the words of the deaf old lady. Everyone felt like 5 thunderbolts exploding above their heads. Everyone has been a deaf and suffering old lady for a long time. Before, she had the status of a martyr's family, and everyone dared not say anything. All the good food at home should be kept hidden, and the deaf old lady will come to ask for it. If she doesn't give it to Yi Zhonghai, she will say you are unfilial and disrespectful to the elderly. Li Haotian saw that the people had arrived almost, and even those who had already left, the second and third masters Yan Bugue, had returned. Then he loudly said, who can go and take a look at the sign on my door, and then see if the deaf old lady is there to see if she is a survivor of the martyrs. I'll go. Before he could finish speaking, the person rushed to the backyard. Everyone looked at the person who ran by and recognized it as Lu Guangqi from the second grandpa's family. The most unlucky person to see Yi Zhonghai is undoubtedly this official fan, who constantly thinks about how to replace him. Now that opportunities are in front of him, how could he miss them? Waiting is long. On such a cold day, everyone can see that Yi Zhonghai's forehead is covered in sweat, constantly wiping it with a handkerchief. After being disturbed by such a commotion outside, Silly Zhu in the main room saw that everyone was bullying an old man. Whether right or wrong, he stepped forward. Silly Zhu cursed at the crowd and said, how many good deeds have you bastards done in your daily life, such as helping neighbors, taking care of disadvantaged households, and taking care of deaf old ladies? Besides, what's wrong with Qin's family being so difficult to provide assistance to? Silly Zhu looked at me again and shouted, Li Haotian, yesterday I thought you were good, but today this matter was done too unfairly. The deaf old lady in the backyard is so pitiful, lonely and helpless. Apart from the 5 guarantees household, she even gave our army grass shoes. If you're not grateful, forget it. As for slandering her so much. Li Haotian was just about to speak when he saw Lu Guangqi come back and guessed that he definitely wanted to speak up and show off, so he gave him the opportunity. Chapter 5. Shame on the Face. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Lu Guangqi ran out of breath, propping his hands on his knees and taking a few breaths before standing up and shouting loudly, "There's a sign for the glorious martyrs hanging at Li Haotian's doorstep." There's nothing at the deaf old lady's doorstep. Everyone heard Lu Guangqi's words, and the crowd was in an uproar. The chatter, discussion, and arguments were incessant. Everyone looked at Yi Zhonghai, wanting to hear his explanation. Yi Zhonghai fell to the ground and exclaimed in his heart, why didn't Li Haotian die? There wouldn't be so many things left after he died. I still hold great respect for an old man, so why bother provoking Li Haotian? Perhaps in these years, whether it's the 8th level worker in the factory or an old man in the courtyard, I've been bloated. Li Haotian looked at Yi Zhonghai, who was silent, and his heart was also uneasy. Yesterday, I embarrassed him, but today he wants to give me some color. He can't wait to come and trouble me. What is he really thinking? Li Haotian didn't understand the importance of reputation in this era. A bad reputation is like a silly pillar. Su Damao and Lu Guangqi are not yet married, and these are all rumors from the hospital, so no one introduced them. Li Haotian saw that Yi Zhonghai remained silent and thought to himself, Yi Zhonghai, you just want to fool me like this. It's impossible. Since you've come to trouble me, let's let you know what heartbreaking is. Li Haotian continued to force him, how come Yi Zhonghai? Aren't you prepared to explain? Why are you pretending to be a martyr's relative with the deaf old lady, or have you never thought about what to do if you're exposed? I saw Yi Zhonghai's face changing uncontrollably, surging with blood and then fainting brilliantly. Seeing Yi Zhonghai faint, a middle-aged woman in the crowd rushed over and helped him up, crying and shouting, Old Yi. Old Yi. How are you? You can't have anything to do. Woo-woo. Silly Zhu jumped out again and said, if Mr. Li Haotian has something to do, I won't let you go. Speaking of which, he still wants to rush over and attack Li Haotian. The 2nd and 3rd masters saw it and shouted angrily, silly pillar, stop. If Silly Zhu listens, he won't be Silly Zhu anymore. I saw Silly Zhu grabbing Li Haotian's neck with his left hand, followed closely by his right hand with a fist, and taking a step with his left foot and stepping onto the ground with his right toe, ready to lift it out at any time. Seeing Silly Zhu's actions, Li Haotian also understood why Su Damao was always beaten so badly in TV dramas. Silly Zhu knows some kung fu, although it's not very good, but seeing him doing this is all a way to defeat the enemy, hitting people to the death. Su Damao was not killed and his fortune-telling skills were great. Li Haotian may want to give Silly Zhu a painful lesson, so as not to be lawless. Seeing him, he doesn't need any fighting moves, and even when he reaches his own level, he doesn't need any moves. Just go ahead, mainly because I wanted to use it but didn't. I saw Li Haotian take a big step to the left and easily avoid his front paw. Before he could kick his foot out, lightning slapped him in the face. Before he fell to the ground, I kicked him in the stomach again. Before he could land, he spat out a mouthful of blood, including a tooth. Silly Pillar lay down in such a gorgeous and beautiful state. The whole courtyard is in a state of uproar. Shocked. I didn't expect the god of war, who had fought all over Nanluoga Lane, to be beaten and vomited blood like this. The 2nd and 3rd masters in the courtyard should quickly go and check on the situation of the Silly Pillar. They both vomited blood and won't be killed, will they? Before he could get close, he saw Silly Zhu spitting out another mouthful of blood and struggling to stand up, but with a few unsuccessful attempts, he groaned in pain while covering his stomach. Su Damao is the happiest person in this courtyard to say that Silly Zhu was beaten. He quickly ran to Silly Zhu and said, Silly Zhu. Silly Zhu, aren't you a cow? Aren't you the god of war in the courtyard? How did you get beaten into a soft-footed shrimp? Ha ha ha. I will definitely make everyone know about you being beaten and vomiting blood, Silly Zhu glared angrily and said to Su Damao, silly Mao. You. Look for a fight. You give me. Wait. Su Damao disdainfully said, cut, you can't even get up now and still want to hit me. Come on. Come on, silly pillar, haha. Yi Zhonghai was rescued and his mind was not yet clear. Seeing Su Damao's slanderous thug, he may have developed a habit of opening his mouth and saying, Su Damao, why did you beat silly Zhu like this? Although you have conflicts, it's just a joke. No matter what you do, you can't kill him. If something happens to the pillar, I won't let you go. Everyone in the courtyard is holding back their laughter, their faces twisted. Jia Zhang muttered softly in the crowd, why didn't you get killed? If you die, that damn orphan Li Haotian will be unlucky. Killing pays off. When the time comes, if silly Zhu dies, his house can be taken over. Damn silly Zhu, why don't you go die? The sudden appearance of a voice is even more speechless at this moment, another elderly shout came. Zhonghai, Zhonghai. Who hit my good grandson, who hit my grandson? My old lady will not let him go even if she tries her best. Zhonghai, speak up. Upon hearing this sound, everyone retreated one after another, fearing that the old lady might mistake them for it too late. Following the sound, I saw an old lady supporting her as she walked quickly towards me. I wanted to invite the deaf old lady to come, but the situation was out of control. Silly Zhu saw the old lady coming and spoke with difficulty, Old Madam. Why did you come? It's okay. The deaf old lady held on to the silly pillar and suddenly turned her head to scold Su Damao, your grandson. What's wrong with the pillar? You're going to hit him like this. My old lady told you, if there's something long or short on the pillar, I won't end up with you. I will stay at your house and ask you to take care of me. My poor pillar. Su Damao became anxious and explained in a panic, deaf old lady, don't talk nonsense. I didn't hit the silly pillar, it was Li Haotian. Yes, it was Deputy Director Li. Su Damao thought to himself, I don't want to retire a deaf old lady. The deaf old lady turned to look at Su Damao and pretended to be deaf and said. What? You're planning to send the pillar to the hospital. Su Damao faced the deaf old lady with a red face and said, no, it's not going to the hospital, it's stupid. I didn't hit the stupid pillar. Chapter 6. Profound Fame. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. De Co Lois Ara Trong Quadrangle Text. Chapter 7. Enemy Agents. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. At Yi Zhonghai's home, several people were preparing to discuss how to escape punishment. The street office that received the message has already called a clerk to Yan Bugui's house. The clerk looked at Yan Bugui and said, is it true that someone in your courtyard is impersonating the family members of martyrs? Yan Bugui said cautiously, I'm not sure either. What Li Haotian said with reason and evidence should be true. The clerk stared and said, as a teacher, would you not know if there is a sign at the door called, Glorious Home. Yan Bugui said, no one has pointed it out before, and no one has taken care of it. The clerk said, the street chooses you as the uncle to guard against enemy spies and deal with conflicts between neighbors. Someone impersonates a martyr's family, but you haven't noticed any of them. You've been making her crazy for several years, and I don't know what you're doing every day. The clerk asked a few more neighbors and left. Before leaving, he told Yan Bugui to notify everyone to have a meeting after work. The deaf old lady from Yi Zhonghai's family said, Zhonghai, can you go to the street to plead for mercy? As an 8th level worker in the factory, you still have to give you some face. Yi Zhonghai couldn't help but say, maybe it's not very useful. I just know a deputy department head. Madam, why don't you turn yourself in? Anyway, this was also your idea. Jia Zhang said, you too have died in poverty. I have let you fight for nothing in these years, and you will lose money. Aunt Yi also advised, Madam, please help Lao Yi. From now on, I will be your biological daughter and be filial to you. If Lao Yi is punished, you won't feel well either. After all, we will take care of you. You can't expect anyone else in the yard. The deaf old lady calculated for a lifetime, but this time she was deeply shocked. Sitting there motionless, her body slowly bent as if she had aged 10 years. Jia Zhang was afraid that the deaf old lady might have an accident when she saw this, so she sneaked away while they were not paying attention. A middle-aged woman wanted to comfort the deaf old lady, but she didn't know how to speak up. Yi Zhonghai's sea surface was ferocious, and a pair of sinister eyes burst out with cold light. I think it's all because of Li Haotian that he became notorious. In the future, I must retaliate against Li Haotian. How many people can survive from the anti-Japanese war are good people? Li Haotian would wander around the department when he had nothing to do. During this time, he met another deputy department head, Zhang Junsheng, and had a brief chat with him. Then, he made an appointment to have dinner together again and parted ways. Returning to the office to pass the time by reading the newspaper, I suddenly remembered that I hadn't checked in yet and thought to myself, system, check in. Ding. Successful check.in, ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining 1 bicycle ticket, 10 5-pound meat tickets, and 200 coal tickets. Seeing a bicycle ticket, Li Haotian grinned to the tip of his ear. You should know that the head of the entire security department has bicycles, while the rest are from the factory. I heard there are also straddle bikes in the factory that can only be used in emergency situations. Li Haotian is idle and practicing internal skills in the office. It's time for work. The other teams have sent people to notify the patrol. In the afternoon patrol area, there are precision machining workshops, office buildings, car classes, family buildings, schools, hospitals, guesthouses, trade unions, and women's federations. 2 people, 1 bicycle, slowly strolled along several buildings. Li Haotian and his team patrolled to the guesthouse and found a room with thick curtains. Getting closer and still hearing the sound of dripping, I realized there was a problem here. Quietly activating his psychic powers, he discovered a capable man sending a telegram in a large wardrobe, secretly recording the contents of the telegram, and then left. After Li Haotian met with the others, he asked a person named Lu Mang to secretly inquire about who was in the room. I asked who could decipher the Morse code again, but it turned out to be illiterate. Just when Li Haotian didn't know what to do, Lu Mang, who was inquiring about the news, came back and quickly asked, "What's going on? Who is that person?" Lu Mang took a breath and said, "The deputy department head has found out that it is Dr. Liao Wenba who works in the hospital. He comes to the guest house for a few days every month because his relatives and friends come and cannot stay at home. Li Haotian has confirmed that Liao Wenba is an enemy spy. He had someone keep an eye on him and report to Uncle Chow himself. He knew that Liao Wenba was taking the risk to send a telegram, and there must be something important." Li Haotian rushed desperately and rushed to the security department of the steel rolling mill at lightning speed. He burst open the door and shouted, "Uncle Chow, we have discovered enemy agents." Uncle Chow was originally angry at me for being so reckless, but when Li Haotian said to jump up as a whole person, the chairs behind him fell down. A few brisk steps approached Li Haotian and grabbed his arm, saying, "Where is it? Did you grab it? Did anyone get hurt?" Li Haotian let Uncle Chow catch him and waited for him to calm down before saying, "We found an enemy spy telegram at the guest house, and then I didn't catch anyone, just let a few people keep an eye on it secretly." After listening, Uncle Chow thought for a moment and said, "I'll go report first. These are all subordinate units of the steel rolling mill, and we need to let the factory director know." Li Haotian saw that Uncle Chow was about to leave, so he quickly took out the note with the Morse code written on it and handed it to him, saying, "This was received by the enemy agent, no one can understand it." Uncle Qiao, holding a note in his hand, gave me a strange glance and walked away without asking any questions or looking back. Li Haotian saw that Uncle Qiao didn't ask how he came, so he let out a soft breath. Li Haotian didn't wait for Uncle Qiao, so he went downstairs and rode his bike to the guest house. I bought some food on the way, and as I approached, I quietly took out a cigarette from the small world. Li Haotian arrived across from the guest house and didn't see anyone from the security department, feeling a little nervous. He immediately released his mental power to explore and soon discovered a house with security personnel inside. Seeing that everyone was fine, he stood still and soon someone came to take me over. The people from the security department greeted Li Haotian one after another, much more enthusiastic than at the beginning. Li Haotian didn't hesitate either. He took out the packaged food and divided it among everyone. He opened the cigarettes and asked, "Is there anything new with Liao Wenbo?" Lu Mang replied, "Brothers, everyone is watching. He has never left the guest house. Because this place is beyond the range of spiritual exploration from the guest house, Li Haotian can only stare quietly with everyone. Everyone tries to keep their voices down when speaking, and during this time, someone else enters the guest house. Li Haotian will change someone else to investigate." As it was getting dark, Li Haotian ordered one person to go back and report safety, while the rest continued to be monitored. Time slowly slipped away, and it was already dark through. At this moment, Li Haotian saw a dark figure and climbed along the wall into Liao Wenbo's room. Li Haotian quickly woke up everyone, and then he quickly rushed over himself. Arriving at the guest house under a tree, he performed a few ups and downs of gecko wall climbing skills and stood lightly on the top of the tree, only bending a small branch slightly. After Li Haotian stood firm, he released his mental energy to explore the room and naturally heard the conversation between the two. The two of them were still wearing masks, but Li Haotian still remembered their appearance. How could they know that there is such a thing as spiritual power, thinking that no one knows what they look like? Both of them used the code name Liao Wenbo to call them Crow, and the other person is called Shadow. At this moment, Liao Wenbo heard him say, "Shangfeng said we must retrieve the files no matter what." Shadow said, "Where are the firearms and ammunition? How many people? When will we start?" Liao Wenbo said, "The sooner, the better. We'll take action soon. There are only 7 people left, and we'll be the only ones. You can take people to the old place and wait for someone to deliver the weapons later." Li Haotian saw that the two of them didn't speak anymore, but opened a bottle of red wine and drank it one by one. After waiting for a while, Li Haotian saw that the shadow was about to leave. He quickly jumped off the top of the tree and returned to the surveillance point, looking at Lu Mang and saying, "Take a few people with you to follow Liao Wenbo and find the place where he hid his gun. I will personally follow the shadow. Do not act rashly, wait for instructions from superiors." After Li Haotian finished speaking, he looked outside and noticed the shadow quietly leaving. He quickly followed suit, while others continued to monitor Liao Wenbo. Shadow must be an experienced spy with too many anti-tracking methods. If it weren't for Li Haotian's mental strength, he would have been lost long ago. The shadow circled around to an abandoned small yard and then pushed out a bicycle. Li Haotian was extremely angry when he saw it. He had a bicycle in his space, but he didn't take it out. Riding the bicycle would make a sound, fearing that enemy agents would find him being tracked. Shadow was still very cautious even though he had a bicycle. He walked around for more than 2 hours before getting home. On the way, he notified the other 5 people, along with him and Liao Wenbo, who happened to be 7 people. Li Haotian saw the shadow coming home and would not come out for the time being. He wanted to turn around and notify the steel rolling mill. But on second thought, who is watching me leave? Even if I try my best to drive, it will take more than 20 minutes. Li Haotian was very conflicted, and in the end, He decided to be ruthless and kill them all if he couldn't. I hope that those who are watching Liao Wenbo will not lose sight of him. Unable to do anything, Li Haotian could only continue to monitor, and another hour passed before he saw Shadow changing into a new outfit and mask. He quickly continued to follow, and Shadow followed a cautious routine, circling around to a courtyard. Two accomplices each came out with two large packages, and Li Haotian guessed that they were weapons and ammunition inside. Li Haotian originally intended to kill them like this, but when he saw so many people living in the surrounding houses. We can't kill anyone with just one blow, it will cause damage to the people around us. Besides, there are still 4 people who haven't arrived, so we can't scare the snake and continue to follow. Chapter 8. Rest. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. De co lois ara trong Quadrangle text. Chapter 9. Lu Xiao'e, Middle. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. The drama, Full of Love in the Courtyard, depicts the tragic fate of silly Zhu, but in this era full of calculation and deception, there is a more pitiful woman, who is Lu Xiao'e. The hardships of life began with the status of the daughter of the Lu family. Lu Xiao'e was used by others throughout her life, and in the end, she had to choose to go elsewhere. Su Damao and his family were among the first to calculate against Lu Xiao'e. In that era, capitalists were not popular, and the Lu family became the target of Su Damao's mother's calculations in order to solve the problem of Lu Xiao'e's future. Through design, Lu Xiao'e was forced to marry Su Damao, becoming a burden on his life. However, married life was not satisfactory, and Su Damao lived a lavish life, blaming Lu Xiao'e for infertility. Lu Xiao'e was neglected in the Su family and even refused to return to the Su family during the Chinese New Year. The reason why Su Damao was able to become a projectionist should be largely attributed to Lu Xiao'e, but she silently endured it only due to the limitations of the times. However, Lu Xiao'e's ultimate tragedy was not due to poverty after marriage, but because Su Damao mercilessly betrayed her for his personal future. Lu Xiao'e doesn't have much affection for Su Damao, but being ruthlessly betrayed by her husband is still a huge injury. This makes people ponder the true meaning of 100-day kindness between a married couple. The other person who calculated Lu Xiao'e was considered the kindest deaf old lady in the play. Although she appears friendly to Lu Xiao'e on the surface, she has been secretly plotting. She has always wanted to match up Lu Xiao'e and silly Zhu, so she is willing to speak ill of Su Damao and speak well of silly Zhu. She even gave the shoes bought by Lu Xiao'e to silly Zhu, with the aim of making Su Damao mistakenly believe that Lu Xiao'e had an affair with silly Zhu, in order to accelerate their divorce. Although the divorce between Lu Xiao'e and Su Damao is not directly related to the deaf old lady, she played a crucial role in the relationship between Lu Xiao'e and silly Zhu. Lu Xiao'e eventually went bankrupt and left the other side, and the deaf old lady should bear some responsibility for this. The reason why the deaf old lady calculated against Lu Xiao'e in this way is because she also has similar ambitions as Su Damao, eager to obtain the property of the Lu family. She originally thought that matchmaking between silly Zhu and Lu Xiao'e would gain the support of the Lu family, but she didn't expect silly Zhu to be so unpopular. In the end, the people of the courtyard also joined in calculating Lu Xiao'e, causing her bankruptcy and helplessness, and she had to leave her hometown. In the later stages of the plot, the Quadrangle Courtyard became a nursing home, and Lu Xiao'e has always been the pillar of the nursing home. However, the financial situation of the nursing home is deteriorating day by day, and silly Zhu and Qin Huairu have never carried out effective economic planning. Lu Xiao'e provided support for the nursing home, but by the time she woke up, she had already spent most of her wealth, sinking into an endless abyss that could not be filled. Lu Xiao'e's life was full of helplessness and hardships. She was calculated by the times and people's hearts, and ultimately could only find a glimmer of hope in the distance. Li Haotian felt pity and tenderness towards the girl in front of him when he thought of these things. Lu Xiao'e understood the pity in Li Haotian's eyes, but couldn't figure out such a good man. Who wouldn't care? Who is he sympathizing with again? Lu Xiao'e saw the person in front of her, his eyes bright as stars, with a deep and mysterious expression in them, making people deeply trapped and unable to extricate themselves. Under his tall nose bridge, his lips slightly raised, revealing an imperceptible smile that made people want to get closer. His hair was dark and thick, gently brushing against his fair face, highlighting his handsome and graceful demeanor. He has a tall figure and outstanding temperament, making it impossible to ignore his existence. His every word and action is full of confidence and charm, making people cannot help but fall in love with him. He is like a born king, and one cannot help but be impressed by his temperament. Lu Xiao'e just stared blankly at Li Haotian, lost in it and unable to extricate herself. Li Haotian saw her in a daze and whispered, "Lu Xiao'e. Lu Xiao'e." Lu Xiao'e regained her senses and saw that her face was quickly covered in red clouds, with a pink and tender appearance that was adorable. Lu Xiao'e was a bit nervous and paused for a moment before saying, "Hello comrade. My name is Lu Xiao'e, I am 18 years old, unmarried, graduated from high school, and currently unemployed." Li Haotian said in a daze, "Hello Lu Xiao'e. My name is Li Haotian, 20 years old, unmarried, and the deputy head of the security department at the Red Star Rolling Mill." Lu Xiao'e lowered her head and buried her face in her chest. Suddenly, she thought of something and said, "Li Haotian, what were you doing just now? Did you read like that?" Li Haotian said, "How can I read books? Even if I have a good memory, I won't be able to do it quickly." "I don't believe it, What I mean is, I don't believe you can read so fast," Lu Xiao'e exclaimed in anger. Li Haotian sneered and said, "I don't believe you will test me." Lu Xiao'e looked up and straightened her chest, saying coquettishly, Just take the exam. If you can't answer, you're just a puppy." After finishing speaking, he picked up the medical book on the table and asked more than 10 questions in a row, and Li Haotian answered them fluently. "I changed one book after another until there were no more books on the table." Lu Xiao'e was also convinced that Li Hao had seen it naively, and she became even more curious about a man in her heart. Lu Xiao'e asked curiously, "Li Haotian, your medical skills are so good, why don't you become a doctor?" Li Haotian said, "I've just been learning medical skills lately. To be honest, I'm not that great. It's not my business to save lives, heal wounds, or sacrifice myself for others. I just want to live well, and only by living can we have hope." Li Haotian invited Lu Xiao'e to sit down and said, "Lu Xiao'e, come and read a book too." Lu Xiao'e said, "I just came out to relax." Li Haotian said, "Can you tell me something?" Chapter 10. Jiehu Lu Xiao'e. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Lu Xiao'e's face was filled with melancholy and her eyes were gloomy as she thought of her own situation. Li Haotian did not urge this, but changed the topic and said, "Lu Xiao'e, do you believe in love at first sight?" Lu Xiao'e shyly said, I believe it." Li Haotian said again, "I like a girl, but I'm afraid she might have a partner and won't accept me." Lu Xiao'e anxiously said, "You're so good looking that even a girl would like you. You haven't asked how you know what others think." Li Haotian smiled and said, "I like you, Lu Xiao'e. Would you be willing to be with me?" At first, Lu Xiao'e was a bit shy, but then she thought of something and her expression became somewhat gloomy, saying, "I went on a blind date, and both of his parents have great expectations of him and want me to marry him." Li Haotian pretended to be heartbroken and asked, "Do you also like him?" Lu Xiao'e suddenly became excited and said, "I don't like him." Then Lu Xiao'e thought of something and said sadly, "I don't like what it's for. My parents raised me so much, what should I pay for this family?" Li Haotian pretended not to know anything and asked, "What's wrong with your family? What's up?" Lu Xiao'e hesitated for a moment as she looked at Li Haotian, then carefully looked around and saw that no one was looking at them. She whispered in Li Haotian's ear, "My family is a big capitalist, and the country is currently suppressing us. My father wants to neutralize the situation, and only my daughter is left behind, so he wants me to marry the son of a poor farmer. Li Haotian said, it's not better to choose someone to join the army. Lu Xiao'e said, why haven't you looked for me? They heard that I am the daughter of a capitalist, and they all despise me very much. They even asked me to leave. Later on, my dad gave up and wanted to find a poor farmer to marry me. My mother entrusted her, dowry maid, to help introduce a poor farmer. Who knew, my mother's maid, had a son. Isn't that just a coincidence? My mother knew the root of the matter and was not afraid of me being bullied. So they arranged a blind date. Li Haotian asked, are you not satisfied with the blind date? Lu Xiao'e said dejectedly, he has a horse-like face, tall and thin. He has a poor tolerance for alcohol and loves to drink. When he gets drunk, he likes to brag. Li Haotian said, he doesn't have any advantages. Lu Xiao'e smiled and said, there's one thing he can do, he's really good at making women happy. My mom is always amused by him. Li Haotian saw it almost and said, I heard you say I'm going on a blind date alone. It's very similar to what you said. Lu Xiao'e exclaimed curiously, who is that? Li Haotian said, my neighbor's name is Su Dumao, a steel rolling mill projectionist. Ah! Lu Xiao'e let out a scream of surprise. The people reading around heard the sound and looked towards this side. Li Haotian pulled Lu Xiao'e to sit down first, then bowed around and said, I'm sorry, comrades. I apologize for disturbing my sister. The people around were all intellectuals, and when Li Hao apologized sincerely, they didn't care and expressed that it was okay. Li Haotian said, let's find a restaurant before we talk. Lu Xiao'e also knew she was sorry, so she agreed. Li Haotian rode his bike with Lu Xiao'e, found a restaurant, ordered a few dishes, and sat down in the corner. Lu Xiao'e hurriedly said, are what you just said true? Li Haotian asked, did you say Su Dumao? Lu Xiao'e said, Li Haotian said, of course it's true, but what I know about Su Dumao is different from what you said. Lu Xiao'e asked, why is it different? Li Haotian said, let's talk about it first. I also heard it through hearsay, and I've only been to that courtyard for a few days. Lu Xiao'e exclaimed urgently, just tell me. Li Haotian said, okay, let me tell you, I don't think Su Dumao is a good person. Lu Xiao'e wanted to speak, but Li Haotian waved his hand and interrupted, listen to me first. Su Dumao has a very small heart and cannot see anyone better than him. Lu Xiao'e said, what do you say? Li Haotian said, take the neighbor in the courtyard as an example. He has repeatedly sabotaged the blind date of Silly Zhu and spread rumors that he has an affair with a widow, which has led to Silly Zhu not getting married yet. Lu Xiao'e said, why call him Silly Zhu? Is he very foolish? Li Haotian said, at first, I didn't know, but after a few days of observation, I finally found out the reason. Lu Xiao'e said, speak quickly and don't play tricks. Li Haotian said, at first, his name was Xiao'e. When I was a child, I went to sell steamed buns with his father and ran into someone who was trying to catch a young man. The two of them ran away. Silly Zhu didn't sell out his buns, but he happened to meet a businessman who bought all of them. He was quite happy to go back and tell his father about the situation. His father noticed something was wrong and asked him to take out the money. When he saw that something was wrong, it was all fake money. His father chased him and fought, shouting, Silly Zhu, that's the origin of Silly Zhu. Ha ha ha! Lu Xiao'e laughed heartily after listening. After laughing, Lu Xiao'e asked, what does this have to do with Su Dumao? Li Haotian said, don't you know that jealousy makes people look unrecognizable? At that time, the Silly Zhu family was doing well, and everyone in the courtyard was jealous to death. Especially when Su Dumao and his son met each other, they said, Silly Zhu, was spread like this. Lu Xiao'e was completely attracted by the story and quickly asked, what happened later? How did it go? Li Haotian said, later on, the two families became enemies and calculated against each other. Coupled with the calculations of the neighbors in the courtyard, in 50 or 51 years, his father, He Da-Qing, suddenly ran away with money. Lu Xiao'e exclaimed in surprise, "Why do you have to run away?" Li Haotian said, "This is an unsolved mystery. Some people spread rumors that they ran away with the widow, but I don't believe it. If you want to marry a wife, just marry her back. Why do you have to run away?" Lu Xiao'e said, "Your yard is really interesting. You'd better talk to Su Damao first." Li Haotian said, "I don't deny that Su Damao's job is better than most people. But he often goes half-hidden and stays at the widow's house in the countryside." Lu Xiao'e said, "You can't hide these things just by asking a little." Lu Xiao'e said, "That's just it. Isn't it all the same for men now? They're eating from the bowl and looking at the pot." Li Haotian said, "What if he is infertile?" Lu Xiao'e was about to shout when Li Haotian quickly covered her mouth. Lu Xiao'e said, "To be honest, how do you know about this?" Li Haotian certainly wouldn't say what he saw in TV dramas. Li Haotian analyzed, "First of all, Su Damao has long been beaten by the foolish pillar. The foolish pillar has a characteristic of liking to kick the crotch, and even after several years of beating, the iron will break." Lu Xiao'e blushed and asked, "His place is broken. How did he find a widow?" Li Haotian said, "If the seed is broken, the thing can still be used." Lu Xiao'e said strangely, "How do you know about such a hidden matter?" Li Haotian analyzed and said, "What do you think? He's not looking for widows one or two, why is only one pregnant?" Lu Xiao'e said, "How do you know she's not pregnant?" Li Haotian said, "Will you give up the opportunity to marry a projectionist?" Lu Xiao'e said, "Thank you for saying so much. It's time to go back and touch it." Li Haotian said, "Then I'll ride your bike and see you off." Lu Xiao'e said, "Thank you for bothering you. But silly pillar, isn't it a projectionist who often eats and takes cards?"